Have you ever had one of those moments where everything seems perfect until it isn't? Like the calm before the storm, where you can feel the tension in the air but have no idea what's coming. That's how it started. Just a regular family picnic at the park, a Saturday that should have been full of laughter and simple joys. But as I sat there, watching my wife Jennifer smile and interact with the kids, I could feel something shifting in the air. And I couldn't have been more wrong about how my day was going to unfold. The sun was shining, the kids were running around, and for a moment, life felt just right. But in the back of my mind, something didn't sit right. It was like my instincts were on high alert, warning me that things were about to change forever. I just didn't know how or when. Then, as if scripted by some cruel twist of fate, it happened. While Caleb and Ava fought over who had the bigger sandwich, I looked up and saw Jennifer walking across the park, heading toward a man I didn't recognize. My heart sank into my stomach. It was that look. The look I had seen in 1,000 movies, but never thought I'd see in real life. She was walking toward him like he was someone she'd been waiting for. Not just anyone, someone else. I stood frozen, unable to process the sinking feeling in my gut. This was it. This was the moment everything changed, and I was standing there like an idiot, watching my family break apart without even knowing how to stop it. You know that feeling when you can't unsee something? The way time stretches and bends, and you're stuck in that one moment, waiting for it to pass, knowing it never will? Yeah, this wasn't going to pass. Not this time. And I couldn't look away. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, watching Jennifer and this stranger by the swings, but it felt like an eternity. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. My wife, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, was standing there, engaged in some sort of quiet conversation with a man I had never seen before. My first instinct was to call out to her, to demand an explanation, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the overwhelming realization that I wasn't ready for the truth. Whatever it was, I stayed rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the scene unfolding before me. The worst part? She didn't even seem to notice me. It wasn't like I was some invisible figure in the background, but her focus was entirely on him, as if she was in a world all her own. My thoughts were spinning, and the nagging feeling in my gut grew stronger by the second. I could tell from the way they exchanged glances, the way her body was angled toward him, that this was no casual conversation. There was something intimate in the way they communicated, something I had no business witnessing. I should have gone to her, right there in front of God and everyone. I should have stormed over and demanded she explain herself, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself sinking into the ground, the weight of what I was seeing pulling me down. The kids were still running around, oblivious to the growing tension between their mother and me, but I couldn't focus on them. Not then. All I could do was watch, helplessly, as Jennifer continued her conversation with this man. Was I imagining things? Was this just some innocent exchange? But deep down, I knew the answer. This wasn't innocent. It was something else. I stood there, wrestling with my thoughts, trying to figure out the next move. The whole situation felt surreal, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The worst part was how calm she looked, how calm they both looked, as if there was nothing out of the ordinary. It was like I wasn't even a part of this equation anymore. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time? The questions flooded my mind, each one more painful than the last. I don't know how long it took, but eventually, Jennifer turned away from the man and began walking back toward me. The smile on her face didn't reach her eyes, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw a distance in her that hadn't been there before. She was still my wife, but she was becoming a stranger before my eyes, and I couldn't stop it. She approached me, her steps a little slower than usual, as if she was trying to gauge my reaction, unsure of what she was walking into. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. What could I possibly say? How could I even begin to address the elephant in the room when my whole world was starting to crumble beneath me? She sat down beside me on the blanket, and for a moment, everything was silent. The kids were off playing in the distance, and for the briefest of seconds, it felt like we were alone in our own bubble, like nothing had changed. But I couldn't ignore the heaviness in the air, the unspoken tension between us. It was like the world had shifted, and I had no idea how to catch up. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light, almost too light. But I could hear the nervousness in her tone. It was almost as if she was trying too hard to sound normal, and I hated it. I hated that I could hear the lie in her voice without even needing to be told. I stared at her for a long moment, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say, but instead, I forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, everything's fine," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She gave me a half-hearted smile in return, but it didn't reach her eyes. I wasn't sure if she was relieved or if she was just playing the part, pretending everything was fine. For the rest of the afternoon, I tried to keep my distance. I played along like everything was normal, but I was dying inside. The kids didn't notice. Of course, they didn't. They were too busy with their own little world, running around and laughing as if nothing was wrong. But I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was very wrong. The man, the way Jennifer had looked at him, the way she had walked toward him, there was no denying it. Something was happening, something I wasn't ready to face. The picnic ended, and we packed up our things, the day dragging on like a slow-moving train. We headed home, the drive filled with silence. I kept my eyes on the road, pretending not to see the tension in her face, the guilt she was trying so hard to hide. Jennifer sat next to me, her body turned slightly away, like there was a wall between us now. And maybe there was. Maybe that wall had been there all along, and I just hadn't noticed. Maybe I had been blind to the cracks forming in our marriage, too busy with the everyday chaos to see what was really going on. When we finally got home, the kids went straight to their rooms, and I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the empty counter, wondering what to do next. I wanted to confront her, to ask her what was going on, but part of me was terrified of the answer. Because deep down, I knew I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to face the truth about my wife. But the truth doesn't wait for you to be ready. It comes whether you want it or not. And I was about to learn that the hard way. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't shake the memory of what I had seen in the park. It gnawed at me, eating away at every corner of my mind. Every time I tried to have a normal conversation with Jennifer, every time we sat down to eat or watch TV, it felt like I was staring at a stranger. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when I knew deep down that it wasn't. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping was going to hurt, but feeling like there was no other choice. By Thursday night, I had reached my breaking point. The kids were at their friend's house for a sleepover, and the house was eerily quiet. It was the perfect time to confront Jennifer. My hands were shaking as I made my way to the kitchen, where Jennifer was making a cup of tea. She hadn't noticed me yet, her back to me as she stirred the tea bag. I watched her for a moment, trying to read her expression, but I couldn't. There was too much distance between us now. She was the same woman I'd married, but somehow, she felt like a stranger. I took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Jennifer," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. She froze for a second, but then turned around with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kind of smile you put on when you're trying to hide something. "Hey," she said, her tone casual, too casual. "What's up?" I stood there for a moment, gathering my thoughts, trying to hold on to the anger that had been building up inside of me for days. But when I opened my mouth to speak, the words caught in my throat. How do you ask your wife if she's having an affair? How do you ask the person you've shared your life with, the person you've trusted, if they've been lying to you? The thought of it made my stomach turn. Finally, I found my voice. "Who was that guy at the park?" The words were out before I could stop them, and I saw her face change in an instant. The smile faded, replaced by something harder, like she had just been caught. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing her options, before she set the tea down and took a deep breath. That's just someone I know from work," she said, her voice unsteady. "A colleague." But the way she said it, the way she avoided my gaze, told me everything I needed to know. There was no conviction in her voice, no real explanation, just a flimsy excuse that didn't even come close to convincing me. I wasn't buying it. "A colleague," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "Jennifer, don't lie to me. I saw the way you were looking at him. I saw how you were walking toward him, like he was the only person in the world. Don't try to cover it up. I saw everything." She flinched at my words, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she just stood there, her eyes darting away from mine. I could see the guilt written all over her face. And in that moment, I felt a crushing weight in my chest. This wasn't the woman I had married, the woman who had promised to love me and stand by me through everything. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you do this to me, Jennifer? Why would you betray everything we've built? She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. I could see the struggle in her eyes, like she was torn between telling me the truth and keeping up the lie. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. I'm sorry, Michael, she said softly. I never meant for it to happen. But I've been unhappy for a while now. Things between us, they've changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. And then, I met him. I never planned for it to go this far. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. All the things I had suspected, all the things I had tried to ignore, were true. She had been unhappy. She had been seeing someone else. And it had gone on for longer than I could have imagined. I stood there, staring at her, trying to process it all. But the more she spoke, the more I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me, like everything I thought I knew about my life was crumbling into dust. I thought we were happy, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought we had something good. I didn't see any of this coming. I know, she said, her voice trembling. I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest with you, but I didn't know how. And now, I don't know what to do. I took a step back, feeling the anger and the hurt rise up inside of me like a tidal wave. You don't know what to do? You've been lying to me, sneaking around, and now you don't know what to do. I shook my head in disbelief. Jennifer, I trusted you. I gave you everything, and you threw it away. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the anger in my chest, but more than that, I felt a deep sense of sadness. How had we gotten here? How had everything we had built together, our marriage, our family, fallen apart so easily? And now, standing in front of me, was the woman who had once been my partner in all of it, the woman I had loved with everything I had. And she was the one who had shattered it all. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. The damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I turned away, my heart heavy with the weight of it all. And as I walked out of the room, I knew one thing for certain. Our family picnic wasn't the only thing that had just been ruined. The life we had known was gone, and there was no way to get it back. The days after the confrontation felt like an endless blur of numbness. I barely slept, barely ate, just existed in a fog of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Every time I walked through the house, I was reminded of what we once had. The dinners we used to share, the little moments that had made me believe we were a family, the times I thought we had a future together. But now, all of that seemed like a cruel joke. Jennifer and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was strained and awkward. The house was no longer a home. It was just four walls that echoed with the silence of everything unsaid. I couldn't escape the feeling that something vital had been broken, and no matter how hard I tried to patch it up, it was irreparable. I spent most of my days avoiding Jennifer. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear her voice. It wasn't that I hated her. It was just that the hurt ran so deep that I didn't know how to face her anymore. Every word she spoke felt like a reminder of the betrayal, a reminder that she had chosen someone else over me. And every time I looked at her, I saw the person I thought I knew, my wife, the mother of my children, now transformed into someone I didn't recognize. I kept telling myself that I needed to stay calm, that I needed to be there for the kids, but inside, I was a mess. My emotions were a whirlwind, and I was just trying to hold it together long enough to figure out what to do next. The kids were the only thing keeping me grounded. They were oblivious to everything that was happening, and I didn't want them to find out. Ava, with her wide eyes and endless questions, noticed the tension between Jennifer and me, but she didn't fully understand what was going on. Caleb, as usual, was just happy to be outside, running around, getting into trouble. But I could see the change in both of them. They could sense something was wrong. They knew their parents weren't the same, and it tore me apart. I tried to put on a brave face for them, but it felt like a lie. I was lying to them just like Jennifer had lied to me. The thought of it made my stomach turn, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't tell them the truth, not yet. They were too young, too innocent to understand the pain their mother had caused. And then, of course, there was Jennifer, the woman I once loved with all my heart, now nothing more than a stranger in the same house. I knew that we needed to talk, needed to figure out what came next, but every time I tried, the words caught in my throat. I wanted to scream at her, wanted to make her feel the same pain she had caused me, but what good would that do? Yelling and crying wouldn't fix anything. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it quickly. As much as it hurt, I couldn't keep pretending that things could go back to normal. Our marriage had been shattered, and no amount of apologies or explanations could change that. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching it. The house was quiet, too quiet, and the stillness was suffocating. I was so tired of feeling like a victim, so tired of letting Jennifer's actions control my emotions. I needed to take back some control, needed to figure out what came next. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. Divorce? Separation? I wasn't sure. But what I did know was that I couldn't stay in this limbo any longer. I couldn't keep living in a house where the air was thick with unspoken words, where every look, every glance, was a reminder of everything I had lost. Jennifer came in, as she always did, and sat on the couch across from me. She didn't speak at first, and I didn't say anything either. It was like we were both waiting for the other to break the silence, to say something that would make sense of everything that had happened. But the silence only grew heavier, like a weight pressing down on both of us. Finally, she spoke. "Michael," she said, her voice hesitant, almost fragile. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've destroyed everything, and I don't know how to fix it. But I want to try. I want to make it right." Her words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with the force of everything I had been feeling. I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had married, the one I had fallen in love with. But then, just as quickly, I remembered who she had become, the woman who had betrayed me, who had torn our family apart. My emotions were a tangled mess, and I didn't know what to say. What was there to say? "I don't know if it can be fixed," I finally said, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Jennifer looked at me, her face a mixture of regret and desperation. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to do whatever it takes to make things right. I want to fix this, Michael. I don't want to lose you. Please, just let me try." Her words were sincere. I could see that. But the question was, did it matter? Could I really just forgive her? Could I wipe away the betrayal and the hurt and move on like nothing had happened? I didn't know. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was just a mistake, that we could rebuild from this. But the truth was, it wasn't that simple. Things weren't the same, and they would never be the same again. "I need time," I said, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them. "I need time to figure out what I want." "What we want?" Jennifer nodded, her face a mask of sorrow. She didn't argue, didn't beg me to make a decision right away. She understood, even if she didn't want to. I could see the weight of it in her eyes, the realization that she had no right to rush me, no right to expect anything from me. The damage had been done, and there was no way to undo it. We were both trapped in this moment, both stuck in the aftermath of her actions. The rest of the night passed in silence. We didn't speak again. There was no more pretending, no more empty words of reassurance. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no going back. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. The road ahead was going to be long and hard, and no matter what happened, our lives would never be the same again. It's funny how life can change in an instant. One moment, everything seems fine, normal, even, and the next, it all shatters. That's how I felt in the days after Jennifer's confession. My world had gone from predictable to completely unrecognizable, and no matter how hard I tried to put the pieces back together, they just wouldn't fit. I spent the next few weeks in a kind of haze, lost between what had been and what could be, unsure of how to move forward. There were days when I thought maybe I could forgive her. Maybe we could rebuild from the rubble of our broken marriage. And then there were days when the weight of everything felt too heavy, when I wondered if forgiveness was even possible. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the uncertainty, the not knowing what came next. I didn't rush into any decisions. If there was one thing I'd learned, it was that I needed time to think, to breathe, to process everything that had happened. The kids, thankfully, hadn't caught on to the tension between Jennifer and me, and I was determined to keep it that way for as long as possible. Ava and Caleb were still kids. They didn't need to know about the cracks in our marriage. But I couldn't ignore how everything had changed. The way I looked at Jennifer now, the way I heard her voice, it was all different. She was still the mother of my children, still the woman I had shared so much of my life with, but the trust was gone. The foundation of our relationship had crumbled, and I wasn't sure how to rebuild it. There were nights when Jennifer would approach me, her voice quiet and careful, offering apologies, asking if we could try again, if we could find a way through this mess together. And there were times when I wanted to believe her, when I wanted to find the strength to forgive and move on. But then I'd remember that look in her eyes when she talked to him at the park, the way she had lied to my face. And the weight of it all would settle back onto my chest, heavier than before. I knew, deep down, that forgiveness wasn't something I could just give her. It wasn't something you could rush or force. It was a process, and that process wasn't going to be easy. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Jennifer and I sat down in the living room. The house felt like a ghost town, too quiet, too still. We hadn't really talked in days, not the way we used to. It was like there was an invisible wall between us, and neither of us knew how to tear it down. Jennifer looked at me, her eyes tired, filled with a kind of regret I couldn't place. "Michael," she said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched between us for days. "I know things are hard right now. I know I've messed up, but I still love you. I want to fix this, if you'll let me. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at her for a long time, watching the way her hands fidgeted in her lap, the way her voice trembled with every word. She was sincere, I could see that. But sincerity wasn't enough. I had trusted her with everything, and she had betrayed that trust in the worst way. I didn't know if I could ever get that trust back. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the way I once did, with the same love, the same certainty that we were meant to be together. "I don't know, Jennifer," I said, my voice low. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She nodded, her face falling. "I understand," she whispered. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell her that everything could be fixed, that we could start fresh, that this was just a bump in the road. But another part of me, the part that was still hurting, still angry, knew that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if our marriage could survive this. I didn't know if I could survive this. But I also knew that I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, that we could just move past it. There was too much pain, too much history between us now. For the next few weeks, Jennifer and I lived in a kind of limbo. We were still married, but everything felt like it was on pause. We went through the motions, making breakfast for the kids, taking them to school, picking them up, but the connection between us had frayed, and neither of us knew how to fix it. There were moments when I thought we could make it work, when I thought maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what we had. And then there were moments when I looked at her and wondered if we had already reached the end of the road. The truth was, I didn't know what the future held. One day, I found myself sitting in the backyard, watching the kids play. Ava was running around, laughing as Caleb chased her with a soccer ball. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The world hadn't ended. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it felt more manageable in that moment. I realized something: no matter what happened with Jennifer, I still had my children. I still had my life, even if it wasn't the life I had expected. And that was enough. Jennifer came out to join me, and for a brief moment, we sat in silence, watching the kids play. The tension between us hadn't disappeared, but it felt different now. Maybe it was because I knew I couldn't keep living in the past, dwelling on what had been. Maybe it was because I realized that the future wasn't something I could control, no matter how hard I tried. I had to accept that whatever came next, I could handle it. "I don't know what will happen," I said, breaking the silence. "But I can't keep going like this, pretending everything is fine when it's not." Jennifer looked at me, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll give you the space you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. But if we're going to move forward, we have to do it together. I can't do it without you." For a moment, I thought about her words. And in that moment, I knew one thing: moving forward wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only option we had left. Whether we stayed together or not, I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, we'd find a way to rebuild what we had lost. But for now, the only thing I could do was breathe, take things day by day, and trust that somehow, things would work out.